So, a Ukrainian counterattack north and west of Kyiv appears to have made some headway. This is video that was produced and posted by the regional police in Kyiv, who toured the city of Makariv, which is about 40 miles west of Kyiv. Makariv appears to have been deserted by Russian forces, though Ukrainian forces say it is still being hit by Russian artillery. If Ukrainian forces are able to consolidate their control in this area, it would limit Russia's ability to attack Kyiv. Let's talk a little bit more about this now with CNN Global Affairs analyst and contributor to Time Magazine, Kimberly Dozier. This is something that really stands out as we talk about Ukrainians really pushing back, bringing the fight to Russians. Tell us a little bit about Makariv and what we're seeing.
Well, you can see it's in contested areas inside the areas that Russia has been controlling. But it shows some proof of what the Ukrainians have been telling us they plan to do, counteroffensives to start taking back key strategic areas. Now, this wasn't supposed to happen. You can see that the Russian troops were trying to encircle Kyiv, something they thought would happen within 24 to 48 hours. At least that's what U.S. officials were fearing and predicting. And now even areas like Irpin are contested as the Ukrainian forces push back. And in Irpin, thanks to the spring, even the river is flooded, which is blocking Russian troop progress. So it's like even nature is fighting against them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was wondering why it was flooded because there were some questions about there, but it really just is this change. We've seen it behind our reporters, the change in the weather, and so you have this increasing flow. Can we talk a little bit about Russian forces? Jim touched on this a bit. They have obviously been experiencing a lot of headwinds, and we knew that. Now they're experiencing frostbite.
Yes, we've been hearing from Ukrainian officials in their daily war reports that they're intercepting communications where the Russian troops say they're demoralized, they can't always pick up all their dead and wounded, and they don't have some of the basic supplies, some of the good medical care that U.S. troops are used to traveling with, and their logistics lines are still pretty terrible. So they're running out of food, depending on where you are located on the battlefield. This is the kind of thing that NATO worked with the Ukrainian military to fix. So what we see is the old way of fighting versus the new.
Is this part of the reason why we're seeing Belarus considering at this point in time getting into the fight?
Yeah, they're, as the Pentagon has told us, Russia deployed about 75% of its tactical battalions, the combat forces that it uses to prosecute this type of an invasion. That means if the battle losses are as reported, between 7,000 to 10,000 killed in action, when you add maybe a ratio of 3 or 4 wounded to every person killed, you're talking about tens of thousands of Russian troops off the battlefield. They need reinforcements. Belarus it shares a border with Ukraine. It's got a trained military that's already been drilling with the Russian military. So they know how to communicate with each other. And the Belarusian president owes his presidency to Vladimir Putin because when he was elected in a contested election that the U.S. didn't recognize a couple years back, and there were tens of thousands of Belarusians on the streets protesting against it, Putin sent in Russian troops to reinforce his rule and keep him in power. So he owes his very presidency to Moscow.
Yeah, they're in this together. I know Berman has a question for you from Lviv. Berman?
Yeah, Kim, I know you follow the United Kingdom Defense Ministry and the statements they make very closely. Over the last few hours, they've suggested, yes, while the Ukrainians are trying to mount these counteroffensive efforts, particularly around Kyiv, the Russians may be using this opportunity to regroup so that they can relaunch their efforts soon. And in addition to that, in the eastern part of the country, they continue to try to perhaps trap the Ukrainians in the Far East in an encircling maneuver there. How much of a problem would that be if they're successful?
Well, that would mean that somebody on the Russian battlefield is starting to use some pretty smart tactics. We've seen a lot of confusion and not a lot of coordination among their troops. But the British forces, the British intelligence is putting this out there so that the Ukrainians get a heads up and can try to counter that maneuver. It's just part of the back and forth you see on the battlefield that shows you this is more of at least a matched fight than the overmatch we thought we'd see between Russian troops and the Ukrainians.
All right, Kim, thank you so much for taking us through that. Really appreciate it.